This is a lot better than I would expect. It's brilliant, it's thrilling. This is pretty remarkable jazz playing. Yeah, I'm not sure this one aged well. This one didn't feel authentic at all. Wouldn't put it in the category of jazz in any way, shape, or form. Man, I'm gonna get so much hate. I hope I didn't offend each and every one of you in some way. Hi everybody, my name is Jeremy Siskind. I'm a professional jazz pianist. I'm a professor of jazz piano. I'm an author of books about jazz piano, and I have a course on jazz piano at Tonebase. And the folks at Tonebase have set me up with kind of a fun little challenge. They've selected a bunch of videos of classical pianists playing jazz, and they've asked me to rate them for how much the classical pianists sound like they could be a real jazz pianist. Now, my wife told me that I should absolutely not do any kind of reaction video because my face is far too expressive, but she doesn't know I'm here, so we're gonna get to some videos. Now, I'm listening for a few things. So first of all, I'm listening for style and articulation in particular. You know, a lot of classical pianists play a little bit too cleanly for a jazz style, right? Jazz is supposed to be conversational, so we want it to feel a little bit more like we're talking to each other. Instead of a lot of classical music, the enunciation really has to be quite perfect. I'm also really looking for articulation and swing feel. A lot of classical pianists have a hard time getting the nuances of swing feel. I'm also listening for pedal. There's a lot less pedal in a lot of jazz music than there is in classical. And then I'll be listening for how they actually play on the piano. What voicings are they choosing? What kinds of melodies are they making if they're improvising? I'm not sure what I'm about to see, but let's dive in. This is just so sweet and joyful. You know, Horowitz is at home, and we all know, or many of us know, that Horowitz was just a huge admirer of Art Tatum, who famously played the song T for Two. And Horowitz, I feel like he's fooling around, he's joyful, he's smiling, and I get this sense, and I'm just reading into it. I feel a humility from him of like, wow, I'll never be Art Tatum, I'll never be able to do that. I just love it, it's just sweet, it's cute, and I love to see this side of Horowitz, who of course we all love. So first of all, wow. She's playing the transcription of Art Tatum, playing T for Two, which is incredible, right? So it follows well from the Horowitz. And stylistically, it's really way better than I would expect it to be from somebody like Yuja Wang, who, you know, I'm not aware of her having much of a relationship to jazz. One of the things that I appreciate about what she's doing here is that once she gets into the tune, like the time is metronomic. This is something that I hear when classical pianists try to play jazz music, is classical musicians are so good at making time really beautifully rounded and taking a little bit of extra breath that usually they don't get that kind of metronomic groove that jazz requires, but Yuja totally has it. You know, obviously, technically, it's brilliant, it's thrilling, and these Art Tatum-esque runs, you know, they're not easily distributable into the beat, but she just plays them with this fluency that fits exactly into the rhythm. On the question of whether I would be fooled that she's a jazz pianist, like, no. She's playing an Art Tatum transcription, which is kind of its own genre. And there are definitely moments in here where the touch is just so clean, especially at the beginning and the end. When she gets into the trill at the end, it doesn't sound like a jazz pianist trill. It doesn't sound like Art Tatum's trill. It really has this kind of classical cleanliness to it. But overall, like I said, because of that metronomic groove that she retains, this is a lot better than I would expect. I'm pretty impressed. Yeah, I'm not sure this one aged well. All respect to the maestro. I can hear that there's a lot of legitimate love for Duke Ellington in this project, but I found it kind of funny, honestly. It sounds like the band and the pianist are playing in completely different universes. The articulation is nowhere near jazz articulation. Maybe that's the point. Maybe it's kind of a postmodern, deconstructive kind of a thing. I found the page turner. I don't know why he needs a full score at the piano. I've never seen a jazz pianist use a page turner like that. This one didn't feel authentic at all. And it's so funny because it's like it's a very modern kind of sounding project based on the piano part, but the band is playing like the most traditional version of this song, Take the A Train. So it's like, why is that band arrangement married with this piano part? So much respect, much love. This pianist did not fool me into thinking they were a jazz pianist at all, which probably wasn't the point of the project. So that's just my opinion.
If you don't want to repeat Barenboim's mistakes, or if you hope to someday play classical piano as well as he does, then check out Tonebase Premium, the platform that makes videos like this possible. Jeremy Siskind's full lessons and lessons by dozens of the world's greatest pianists are waiting for you. Check the link in the description below to get started and to take advantage of the Black Friday sale, the best time of the year to get started with Tonebase Premium with up to 50% off all plans. Now, back to Jeremy.
A solid B on the jazzometer. So a couple things that I like. First of all, I believe that he's improvising. He really has that sense of exploring and discovering. Secondly, the voicings are very nice. I think the jazz voicings, he's got all the color in there that he needs. And thirdly, so he's playing a tune called Just You, Just Me, which is really highly associated with Thelonious Monk. Monk plays this tune, and he also writes what we call a contrafact, another tune based on the same chords called Evidence, which became even more famous. And the joke there is that Just You and Just Me together makes Just Us, which is justice, and you need evidence to get justice. This is a little jazz insider knowledge. I bring that up because I'm hearing Debargue use voicings that seem to indicate that he realizes that the song is associated with Monk. I hear him using kind of these rubs, which are very monkish and show that he has like some historical contextual understanding. The part where he really loses me is on the swing feel. So the trouble with swing feel for a lot of classical players, and I do kind of hear him falling into this trap, is that the first note of every pair gets lengthened, right? Instead of playing. We play it. Now, where classical players usually, they usually kind of miss the point is that they're often putting more weight on the downbeat note. We get this. What some people call a ricky-ticky swing feel, which is really heavy on the beats. And I kind of hear that in this video. And better jazz players are either playing it more evenly or they're putting more weight on the offbeat. And so for me, it kind of gives away that he's not necessarily playing jazz piano all the time. But still, I really applaud this version. I think for an encore after a classical recital, this is pretty remarkable jazz playing. This is such a sweet video. I love this. It seems like he's really just having a lovely afternoon or morning in his house with his family and playing. It sounds like he really loves this music. This is a Bill Evans tune called Very Early. And a lot of classical pianists love Bill Evans because he has a beautiful sound on the piano. He uses a lot of really interesting pianistic techniques, and he's just a really sophisticated musician. And you could just see that the love here is authentic. In terms of the style, I think it's like pretty good. The voicings are nice, the solo piano techniques being used are nice. He seems to be playing harder and louder than most jazz pianists that I know would in this kind of a setting. He's really pushing out the sound with these pianistic gestures that feel like they're made, to project to the back of a concert hall, whereas that's not usually what we're designed for as jazz pianists. We're designed for more intimate spaces. And then especially as he got to the big octaves in the top of the piano, it was like, oh wow, this is not a sound that I usually hear from jazz pianists. But he's doing this technique called left-hand shuttle, where he's going back and forth between a bass note and a chord. He's doing that beautifully. The voicings are appropriate. And the swing feels really natural. It feels really kind of conversational in the way that I expect from jazz pianists. So I think this is lovely and would love to hear more. Man, not only would I definitely know that I'm hearing a jazz pianist, but I would check when Andrei Previn was playing at the club again so I could keep coming back week after week. It's beautiful playing, and it captures the jazz style while still like sounding like him. It doesn't feel like he's putting on a weird mask, like that intro and the ending to me feel like Scriabin or something. And there's that moment in the bridge, the part in E minor where he's playing all this counterpoint, which kind of feels like a 4-part chorale or fugue or like, this contrapuntal thing. So like beautiful, brilliant playing, totally sounds authentic to my jazz ear while also having like an individual voice. It doesn't feel derivative in any significant way. So this is an A+, give however many pluses you want. I just think it's beautiful playing. What a fun, energetic performance. Lots of jazz elements in there. We heard, kind of elements of the elements of the blues in there. We do have some kind of jazzy chords. We have dominant 7th chords with a flat 9, for instance. There's some elements of swing, but in general, I would rather see that in a concert hall than in a jazz club. It doesn't really sound much like jazz to me. He doesn't really sound like a jazz pianist to me. He sounds like a very skilled pianist with some jazz influence, but the articulation is too clean. It's obvious that he's written most of this or the whole thing out. A lot of his chords don't have quite as much color as I would expect from a jazz pianist. Like he uses 7ths and sometimes 9ths, but real professional jazz pianists always use 9ths and then add upper extensions. So I'm hearing a lot of like this kind of a major chord instead of this kind of a major chord. And those kinds of sounds just cue me that he belongs a little bit more in the classical world than in the jazz world. The articulation also kind of just has this instead of much respect, much love. I'm not gonna go hear him at a jazz club. Well, it's beautiful writing, it's beautiful playing. It's not trying to be jazz, and I don't think it comes off as jazz. It's far too straight, and the harmony has some jazz elements, but it doesn't really seem like it's trying to imitate jazz that much. It sounds a little more, I don't know, Prokofiev-esque than like Bill Evans or Oscar Peterson or Errol Gardner or something like that. Lovely arrangement. Wouldn't put it in the category of jazz in any way, shape, or form. I have very mixed feelings about this one. I thought the first 2 minutes of that were like brilliant, beautiful playing that I could totally imagine being satisfied with, if I'd heard a jazz pianist playing that. I could tell that this artist is a big fan of Keith Jarrett. Like this sounded very highly influenced by Keith Jarrett's introductions. I did kind of feel like, so he went in to take the A Train, one of the great jazz standards, and it did feel like he wasn't maybe as on point motivically, like seeing the motifs through as Keith was, but his feel, his sound, the sense of exploration, the voicings, leaning into dissonances that were really interesting, really lovely. And then the second half was really technically impressive, but definitely doesn't fool me to thinking he's a jazz pianist. He basically just seemed like he was playing as fast as he possibly could, trying to, rouse everybody from their seats, and it worked. But all those glissandos, all those, fast tremolos, a very inconsistent tempo once he got started, like that's not really what we're going for in jazz. We want to work within the confines of a tempo and a tune. Much respect, especially for that first half, which was just like really beautiful playing. The voicings were great, but the second half wasn't for me, especially from a jazz perspective. Wow, I think my eyebrows are just gonna stay up for a while. That is impressive. It sounds like Art Tatum on like some weird psychedelic drug, because it has the playfulness, it has the spontaneity, and definitely it has the virtuosity that we associate with a pianist like Art Tatum. And there's those hints of things like stride piano, and there's very characteristic runs. But it's harmonically much more kind of avant-garde. So he's playing a Duke Ellington song called Sophisticated Lady, and he never loses track of the tune. He never loses track of the melody. It feels like everything that he's doing, even though it is so decorative, so ornamental, so virtuosic, it always has something to do with the melody and always comes back to it. And it's just very impressive, the flow from one idea to the next. It feels kind of like a jazz piano, a really good jazz pianist, in that way that, there's not a moment of thinking from one, virtuosic device, from one musical section, from one arrangement principle to the next. It's just like spontaneously, here's how it needs to go. There's like no filter. So I'm very impressed. And yeah, I think I would buy him as a jazz pianist. It would be an interesting concert, and I'm a little exhausted after like 3 minutes because there's just so much coming at you, and it's all really dense and it's all really brilliant. It would be interesting to hear him play something more in tempo, but this was pretty exceptional. This was pretty amazing to me. I'm impressed. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. Remember, these are just my opinions, and I know that all these pianists, they're better players, they're more legendary, they have bigger careers than me, so, you can save your comments that I have no right to critique them because I already know it. But I am interested to hear what you think, so write some comments about where maybe you disagreed with what I thought about some of these performances. And don't forget that on Tonebase, you can take my jazz piano class and a jazz theory class that I made as well to learn a little bit more about what makes something really sound like jazz. Until next time.